Hello, welcome to the Cube Pod, episode 100. I'm John Furrier with Dave Vellante. Dave,
Oh,
salute.
John, 100.
100,
Lucky
100th
number.
episode, 100 in
Congratulations.
the books,
Love
100
it.
Cube Pods. Cube Pod's getting a lot of traction as the #1 enterprise podcast. We just at RSA Summit had multiple people said, saluting you, Dave, on the fly. I'm like, I do the salute too. Not as good as Dave, apparently. So Dave, just and give me your form on your salute there. What is it? You
My
hold your elbow.
left-handed salute. It's
You,
left-handed. That's what everybody.
all
I don't
right.
know if
So,
that is that. I hope that's not like disrespectful
well, Elon had
in
the
any
salute,
way.
so I try not to salute
Yeah, but his salute
Elon.
was like in Hitler's. I mean, that's
100
like,
salutes, baby. We
that's,
got it down. Fist pumps. 100 salutes, 100 episodes. Really, it's amazing. I think the enterprise is the hottest thing right now, hottest startup category by far. Every consumer AI company is essentially born in the enterprise cloud or on-prem. Anything to do with enterprise used to be kind of a very niche vertical. Not niche, it's massive, but it wasn't mainstream VC. It wasn't the young guns coming out of college. Agent is the new SaaS. SaaS middleware, cloud is the new data layer. AI infrastructure at the semiconductor level is booming. We're going to hear a bunch of announcements next month on new capabilities from Broadcom, from NVIDIA, new operating systems frameworks. Cloud native, KubeCon, which we've been covering, is exploding. Everything that we've been covering for the past 15 years has been exploding in all categories. It's not just enterprise, it's the new consumer is enterprise cloud, cloud security. We just came back from RSA. This podcast is where we go deep. We kind of drop some nuggets of value. We can, best we can. So again, Dave, enterprise and emerging tech, our thesis, computer science meets social science, extracting the signal from the noise. That is the Cube Pod. That is the Cube. That is the Cube community, the Cube network, the Cube marketplace that is emerging. It is up absolutely on fire. All the things we've been saying, most of it's coming true, if not 80% of what we've been speculating on, connecting the dots, all validated by this past week at RSAC, which is a security show, which is basically an AI horizontal show. Amazon earnings, Microsoft earnings, Meta earnings, the cloud roundups we've been doing, the Apple earnings, Intel's roadmap show, all pointers are looking at the enterprise as the bellwether category. If you look at Wall Street at the NYSE, when we're there, the options trading floor, you can't just, the bells are ringing. It's red, it's green, it's Tesla, it's NVIDIA, it's everything. Everything going on in tech now, whether it's now crossing over into policy. We had Amit on from Open Policy, even the AI for good, the AI governance, everything about AI is enterprise. Everything about enterprise is consumer. The agent summits we've been doing, we had 2 of them. We had Scott Hebner's Cube Research. We had the agent geek conference. I call it the Alpha Geeks with Simon Chan's group. He's got an event on May 5th. Everything's pointing to the agents. Agents is the new SaaS. It's a 10 to 1, maybe 100x. Some people are saying, I think it's more like 10 to 15x size of SaaS. Some people in the Y Combinator community are saying that the agent layer, agent applications might be 100x bigger than the SaaS revolution. So, Dave, 100 podcasts in, I mean, looking back, it's been amazing. And the earnings continue to support our notion that the rich are getting richer, but diversity, it's not the old guard versus the incumbent startups. It's the startups growing and the big guys growing. I mean, the earnings are undeniable. I mean, even with the
yeah.
fluctuations with some of the geopolitical stuff, the performance of these companies, they're operating with a mindset, culture, and tech product led growth roadmap that's right in line. Everybody's winning with AI. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. So, I mean, to me, the big takeaway from the cloud earnings that we saw from Microsoft, and Microsoft absolutely blew away its Azure number. I had them at like 28% growth. They came in at 35% growth, constant currency. It's interesting to see and of course the stock was up, very nicely on that news. It was interesting to see the Amazon reaction because Amazon had a great quarter, in my opinion, but their guidance was tepid. They lowered the low end range of the guide which I thought was really smart, because what a lot of companies are doing, John, is they're saying, okay, well, if recession and inflation, this is the guide. And if things are normal, then this is the guide. And I think, it's classic Jassy. Well, why are you doing that? Just like expand the range, so best case, worst case, like keep it simple, people. And so I thought that was actually clever, but the street inferred from that, bad news. But Amazon beat my estimates, AWS specifically. I had them at 16% growth. They came in at 17% growth. Evidently, the street had them at, above that. So I thought it was very, very strong. But what it says to me, John, is these Mag 7 companies, they have the ability to withstand these challenges. Apple earnings, I thought were interesting. Yeah, a lot of people freaked out because, they're not seeing a super cycle for iPhone, but I thought services was like really strong. And I just think, again, Apple and they gave kind of opaque guidance on services that freaked some people out. But I think these companies, whether it's Amazon, Google, AWS, Microsoft, NVIDIA, all the challenges it's facing with regard to the China and the regulations, I just think they're so big. They have such strong cash flows. They have such good, strong management, such massive ecosystems, such operating leverage that they will figure out how to navigate through these problems, and they will continue to prop up, the economy. That's how I feel about it. That was my big takeaway from these earnings, and I got a lot of detail and a lot of data on it.
Yeah,
That I'd
well,
love
I
to
want to
get
get your
into.
thoughts on Amazon versus Azure and the Google Cloud, because we were talking about Google Cloud next, them moving fast up. Azure numbers you mentioned surprised you in a different way. Amazon's operating profit up 20%. Okay, now today, well, first of all, there's a little filing that Jeff Bezos is going to liquidate about 4.7 billion worth of Amazon stock over the next few months through the end of May.
What
You
was the
look,
number? 4.7 billion?
7 billion. So he
7 billion?
4.75
Yeah, that's
billion of
peanuts.
Amazon.
That's peanuts. That's like nothing.
25 million shares is still, he's
I
got to pay
know,
for
but
the
people sell. People sell for a lot of reasons. They buy for only
David
one.
gas fees for the
For the boat.
rockets. Yeah,
Yeah.
and the boat. The other filing that is being reported is Amazon's restructuring part of their $8 billion Anthropic investment, which was a convertible note, into stock in Q1, a $3.3 billion pre-tax gain that boosted the profits. So, little bit of Amazon, playing the game with credits to profits to stock. So, if they're doing that, if they got revenue, if they gave away credits for equity and then got a $3 billion gain, I mean, damn,
I know.
damn.
I know, right? Yeah, good news for Anthropic.
And then Apple earnings were up, and then kind of related story, but kind of threaded. We can come back to it. Apple plans to secure $19 billion plus in chips in the U.S. from TSMC's expanding operations in Arizona, aka Silicon Sands. Arizona is absolutely becoming like Texas with the solar and the energy there, a Silicon Valley like vibe, if you will. Vibe coding, vibe semiconductors. Dave, it's
Vibe code.
vibe.
Can I make a comment on that?
Yeah.
What's interesting is Lip Bhutan held an Intel like roadmap innovation day. No mention of ARM, no mention of Apple, no mention of NVIDIA. But I actually am getting more positive on Intel finally. I think it's a bittersweet positive. What I mean by that is, look, they're not going to do a spin out apparently, and create a joint venture as I proposed in my bold plan to spin out and create a new venture, which would have secured, in my opinion, a U.S. headquartered advanced manufacturing foundry. Rather, what Lip Bhutan is going to do is dial down cost, which is very prudent. He's going to cut, and he's going to focus. And essentially, I think he's going to do very well in the not so advanced manufacturing silicon game. So it's another global foundries with greater capabilities, better, deeper technology roots, more volume than certainly global foundries, but they, I think, won't achieve their objective of becoming, a close second to TSMC. I think they're going to give that aspiration up, but they'll be a profitable and viable company. So I'll take that. That's better than going bankrupt, which is where they were headed. I'm disappointed that my bold plan is not going to get implemented, but I think it's exceedingly more viable
Well, I
than
mean, your bold
the path
plan
they were
is
going on.
basically is great analysis, and I'm sure that shaped Intel's kind of wake up call. I mean, basically, what you're saying is Intel had a wake up call, right? So, their Lip2 is strong leader, well respected. Even some of the people in the Intel capital, I call the Intel capital mafia, have been chirping to me behind the scenes like he's the real deal. People are excited that he's in charge. There's positive momentum around the practical realities of where Intel is. Like we've talked about the waves they've missed. I mean, Dave, they've missed what? How many waves did they miss that they blew it on? They missed Apple.
They
They missed
missed
the AI
Apple
wave.
slash
I mean, the AI wave was a big
smartphones.
miss. ARM. I mean, so many misses.
Supposedly, according to Morris Chang, um, Intel, there's my, Chip War, the book Chip War, and conventional wisdom said that Intel passed because they said the margins weren't good enough. And I believe there was some truth to that, by the way. Morris Chang claims that Intel actually put in a bid for the iPhone, and Apple rejected it because Intel's foundry was not set up to service third parties. It was a captive foundry. And so as a result, Apple passed. Some of that maybe makes sense, some of it doesn't. I'm like, okay, but they were using Intel chips for their laptops. So what's the difference? So I guess the difference is they were x86s when they were asking them to make something unique. I suspect it was a combination of Intel's price was much, much higher, and they wouldn't meet Steve Jobs' margin requirement. And I think there's some validity to what Morris Chang supposedly said or wrote. I haven't read the book yet, but somebody was telling me that was in his new book, so I got to read that. But so they missed that. Whether or not they missed it for reasons Morris says or because of cost or their own hubris. They really, I mean, they missed out on cloud a little bit because AMD kind of beat them, right? I mean, you're right. I mean, think about it. They were dominant inside of AWS early on, and then all of a sudden, Graviton came in, and AMD became a really preferred alternative. So I don't know. And then they certainly missed, the next wave of advanced manufacturing for silicon. They missed AI. So I'm just, I believe that the U.S. should have a headquartered based firm. So here, play this out with me. So what happens when, it's not if, it's when China takes over Taiwan? China takes over Taiwan, then it owns, essentially the IP in TSM. So because people will say, well, TSM will have facilities in the U.S., but unless that IP comes over to the U.S., that's going to be locked inside of Taiwan. China's going to control that. And then what will happen in that instance is the U.S. will say, okay, and China will say, no chips for you, U.S. The U.S. will say, okay, we got to ramp up our U.S. manufacturing, and then you're going to create, zones, and China will be in the lead for some period of time. U.S. will constrict their sales of software like they have always, like EDA and other software and the like, and then you'll have a very much a bifurcated market, and not a global supply chain like we have today.
I mean, I don't think China's going to take over Taiwan. That's my take. I think the
Oh, I
U.S.
think it's a
has to.
lock.
Okay. Well, I mean, we'll see. I mean, it's speculation. I mean, right now the China issues are, and NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang has been talking about it. The U.S. has to get better. Because if you look at all the news that's on SiliconANGLE right now and in the zeitgeist, the AI generated AI metadata, the AI impact is so profound that the U.S. has to be there. The factories will take some time to ramp up, but it's going to look a lot different. I mean, if you look at even some of the successes with the coding assistants, I think the DeepSeek alternative, which was essentially driven by the CUDA alternative, has got Jensen's attention, which is why I think he went over there. But again, we'll see how that all plays out. But that's definitely a behind the scenes. I call it the Cold War of tech, and a lot of people in tech are trying to figure it out. And I can tell you right now, the scuttlebutt in Silicon Valley and New York is the money on the line right now is very dot-com bubble-ish in the sense of everyone's euphoric. But the reality is agents are happening. There are pockets of value creation. And I think the coding assistants are absolutely a part of it. For example, if you look at things like Cursor, Replit, what Amazon Q developers doing just today announced more goodness. I saw Swami had a post out. That is expanding value, right? So the value proposition on revenue generation, unlike the dot-com bubble, is happening much faster. So the reason why I believe that this won't be a bubble pop like a pin to the bubble that's expanded the hype, I think it's a slow, let the leak of the balloon leak out slowly bubble. I think there will be some clear white spaces for startups. But as we said in the Cube pod many times, and this was validated by experts that came on the Cube at RSAC, where security is really the canary in the coal mine for all AI because they're red teaming models. I mean, everything around AI, if you look at it, is like semiconductor, a deep seek kind of innovation algorithmically, and then security. They get their hands in everything. They're all pointing to the fact that bigger companies can succeed and be more agile than before. Therefore, they can compete on the step function scale that AI brings. Sanjay Ponin talked about this when I interviewed him. He's a student of the industry. He's at the prime of his career as CEO of Cohesity, now Veritas. He's also seen these waves before. He was adamant that this ability to be agile for the big companies isn't the old formula of entrepreneurship, which is when we grew up, Dave, the little guy stays stealth, goes after the big guy's turf, eats their lunch, then their dinner, and they're out of business. The ones that don't transition, per John Chambers' edict, is out, right? So not now. I mean, Amazon, Google, Cloud, these are all big players that would be considered incumbents. Look at Dell AI Factory. Look at NVIDIA. Certainly, NVIDIA is the new guard as an incumbent. So I think that this is a whole different technical architecture revolution, business model revolution. I think business transformation is the new digital transformation. So that's what's all coming down because the economics got to be reset, the technology roadmaps have to be reset, and the replatforming of tech stacks is happening. And that's why at RSA, our thesis of the replatforming of security is happening. And that was the top theme this week. And I'll remember, I forget what year it was. It might have been 2012. I forget what year it was. You asked Pat Gelsinger, okay, when he was, I think, president at EMC before he took the helm at VMware.
Is security a do-over?
Is security a do-over? And he said
yes.
He didn't even blink. It was like in RAN. It was like in it was in non-volatile memory at the top of his tongue. Yes, of course it's a do-over.
It was in cache.
And then he goes, okay, let's check that again. Yeah, but and then
it was definitely in
it was
cache.
Basically in cache, all tiered, ready to go. But then remember, he's backed up. He kind of well, let's discuss this. And the reality is that you can't really do it over, but now it is.
But let me ask you a question.
Yeah,
I want to go back to something you said because you're so right. The point you made, John Chambers' point, is right on. How did he say it? There is no guarantee. He used a different phrase. But at any rate, what he's talking about when he was at Wang. I mean, I grew up here, Prime, Wang, DG, Digital Equipment Corporation, Apollo, those five, several others, but then Sun Microsystems. But take the East Coast mini computer companies for a second. Ken Olson, Unix is snake oil. Who needs a PC? All that stuff. They just got blindsided. And then look at Sun Microsystems. I mean, a great company. I mean, Sun was awesome. Okay. So what's different now? Is it the managements are better or smarter? They've learned, they've read more Crossing the Chasm books, or is it because there's the cloud, the internet, and more software? They can move faster. Infrastructure is code. Why do you think today's leaders aren't getting, disrupted? I mean, some are, but not to the degree that we used to see it. I mean, we used to see companies just virtually disappear, within a better part of a decade. Why do you think?
I mean, to me, it's very clear. The old guard, I worked at Hewlett Packard before it became HPE and split. Hewlett Packard Enterprise. It was a mini computer company. Yeah, it had test and measurement. They had medical, diversified business. When I joined the company, it was an $8 billion business. And something happened in that company called the laser printer. The laser printer was a direct attached peripheral device to the PC. Mac had laser writer. So, but what it really did was it rode the wave of PCs. PC's architecture was open. It was growing. It was a shift. It was one of the big shifts. Now the shift we're living in now is like the PC industry, the web, SaaS, cloud, all rolled into one. Okay, so what happened in that generation is that wave was targeting the mini computers. You mentioned some of them: Wang, DEC, the
Prime,
Prime,
DG,
DG. Hewlett Packard was in that
Apollo,
category. Hewlett Packard
yeah.
would have been out of business as a company, probably, if it
Except for the
wasn't,
printers. Yeah,
except for
you're
the
right.
printer. And they had a personal computer that was proprietary because it was built for being a driver of their test and measurement equipment. So they had proprietary keyboards. I know that because I lived there and did a lot of the product work there. And that revolution of the PC was agile, fast growing, and the systems guys had a completely different incompatible systems. And now what also fueled that was the fact that the OSI model, the Open Systems Interconnect, was a part of the standards revolution that came out of the early stages of the internet. Transport Control Protocol over the internet protocol was TCP/IP. That created Cisco. Once people started having networks that were open, the rest of the stack was fine, but you had homogeneity in the layers 1 through 5. Okay, so you had proprietary systems, mini computers, open protocols, and a hardware computing platform that was based on open protocols and open productivity that was different functionality. That almost maps directly to today's value proposition. If you take what I just said and map that to today, you got open source software, you got protocols that are emerging on a faster pace than ever before. I think I had 4 conversations at RSAC around new protocols around models. You've got models, apps, and infrastructure, 3 areas that are booming. So the reason why companies can move today is that the substrate of their platforms are now in the same position as the new incumbents, the new players, the new emerging brands. And the reason why Airbnb and Dropbox, no-name startups that came onto the cloud scene, reason why they were successful, they rode the disruptive enablement of cloud, which moved much faster. So the game is about speed, and speed inherently favors the people who can leverage that speed. So, okay, now let's go to the next level.
So internet and cloud.
So who has the data and the workflow? So all these enterprise companies, which tend to move slower because of reasons like pre-existing software infrastructure, pre-existing security resilience, parameters and bar that's high, all these things make the enterprise inherently slower than greenfield things. Greenfield meaning new opportunities, no brownfield meaning existing. So you have startups that are coming into an enterprise market, which I said at the top of the podcast. They're inherently enterprise by default because it's the cloud. It's all open, all large scale, and the data favors the incumbent. Okay, if you look at large scale enterprises, even growing mid-sized enterprises that are living in IT from the 90s, having switches, firewalls, and network infrastructure, they're moving to the data layer, Zscaler, Success. I interviewed another company that was doing a thing with healthcare. They're kicking ass because they just moved above the network layer. So you have protocols, you have infrastructure, you have all the applications, and now you have the agentic layer that can abstract away the capabilities of that brittle and old pre-existing. So that means any company that has data and workflows and scale on open standards with scalable protocols wins. And that means that's a startup, that's a big company. Now, if you got customers, back to the coding assistance dot that we threw out there, the revenue matters, right? So if you go back to the mini computer days, imagine if they could just snap their fingers and turn that system into a PC, they would be riding that wave too, right? So, these new waves usually favor the incumbent because the structural shifts favor the new players, like the mini computer versus the PC, and all the software that enabled, all the wealth that was created out of TCP/IP, which was Cisco, 3Com, all those companies that created network protocols, which were firewalls, all that stuff, and the security stuff comes in. I mean, again, it's so obvious to me that this is happening. May not be obvious to the world and Wall Street, but that's why product-led growth is the big discussion over EPS on Wall Street right now. If you talk to all the top people, which I'm on the floor now, I'm talking to all the top financial analysts, they're all telling me, yeah, EPS, earnings sandbagging, and, forecasting is BS because they're used to that reporting. They're looking at product-led growth because revenue comes out of it. The revenue moves the stock price. Revenue moves market share. Revenue means customers. Customers are now working with the company that delivers the data, the workflows, and the scale, and ultimately the better product. So that's why the big companies, Dave, are now in play.
So
If you're culturally a slow big company, you're dead either way. I mean, it doesn't matter. You're a walking dead. So if I'm investing right now, I'm looking at culture, management, what protocols they're writing on, what infrastructure is their software running on, and what do their tech stacks look like in this modern era. That has to factor in more complicated things like models. Where's the algorithmic innovation? Algorithmic innovation right now is going to be the hottest category as we go into the end of 2025 and into 2026. All AI is going to move quickly to low-hanging fruit use cases to who has algorithmic scale. DeepSeek was the first shot across the bow on this in my mind. They weren't an innovation around a new chip. They were an innovation on how they did their software. And I think smart money right now is looking at this very carefully. And that's why when you look at the new chips coming out in the second half from Broadcom, NVIDIA, AMD, Intel, you're going to look for
Huawei,
massive gains in performance
Huawei.
and network performance, storage performance, and we're back to the holy trinity: storage, networking, and compute. So again, long answer, but it's good vibes. It's a cultural shift, vibe coding, vibe marketing, vibe podcasts like this. I mean, it's going to be good
Well,
vibrations all
the
around.
interesting disruption now that we're gonna watch and see how Google navigates through it is it's this headline in my dead tree. I got the Financial Times here, John,
Yeah, I
and
can't get that. I got a paywall. You got the actual tree.
well, they charge an arm and a leg to get the online. I mean, it's like $1,000 a year,
I
and I'm
pay for
like,
The Economist because they posted our stuff on Digital Twins last year. George Gilbert wrote. So
Autonomous is good. So this headline: ad groups shift to AI chatbots poses threat to Google's search monopoly. I mean, that's part of the reason why Google's been pressured. Plus, the government's trying to break them up. Advertising groups and tech startups are seeking to help brands boost their presence and results from AI chatbots, marking a new era for online search. Companies such as Profound and Brand Tech have developed software for monitoring how frequently brands are mentioned by AI-powered services such as ChatGPT, Claude, Google's overview features, and of course, one of our favorites, Perplexity. So, this is going to be really interesting to see. I don't know. Did you hear Chamath's rant on Google? I thought that was pretty good, actually. He's a good product guy. Did you hear what he said?
no, I did not.
I think it was right. He's like, because we're a Google shop, and it's like Google has this awkward way of inserting Gemini into the workspaces. It's just kind of pops up there. It's sort of in Docs. It's in Google Drive. It's just not a clean experience. His point was they should just step back and identify where the potential for monetization is, and then really elegantly insert it there with somebody who understands UX. But at any rate, what's your take on whether or not these upstarts like
I mean,
ChatGPT and stuff
Chamath is analysis is pretty pedestrian, in my opinion,
no, I
because
thought it
he
was
caters
good.
to
I thought
more
it
of the
was
main
good.
street. Well, Olin's got a bigger audience. They're going for the we're the podcast
But wait,
version.
wait, 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 wait. So his main point, which I thought was a fair point, was the 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 person who's making the decision about how to insert Gemini into the Google stack really isn't a good product person. His argument was it's probably a junior person that hasn't really thought through what a great user experience is, because the user experience with Gemini in workspaces and Drive and Gmail, it is awkward. And search even is awkward. Sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not. You never know
Yeah,
what to
but
expect.
Chamath really hasn't really built any products, right? So he's
That's
not a
not true.
he's. I mean,
Wasn't he a product guy at Facebook?
he was. I don't know. It's not how long he was there for. A couple months.
No way.
He
Really? Was he only, is he just bullshitting everybody? I mean, I don't know. I don't know the guy. You might know him.
he was a product manager at AOL. He went to Facebook. He didn't last long. Facebook. I mean, if the Facebook people who say they worked at Facebook. I mean, I like Chamath. I mean, he's got great analysis. Like I said, it's pedestrian because He is an insider. He sees a lot of things. He's not dumb. He's smart, but his comment about Gemini is completely off. I mean, like the Gemini product manager is not making decisions on workspaces. Workspaces is enabled by AI, so Gemini is input into workspaces. So anyone with product chops would know that. So he's just trying to look like he's smart about Google, and he's not. I mean, I don't know how much he knows about
He
Google.
was the head of platform and monetization and mobile and international. He was there for 4 years. So,
Yeah,
but anyway,
moving around. He claims
yeah,
famously
he
was
moved around. You're
his
right. He was there one year here, one
his
year
claim to
there.
fame was he did the mobile growth, which I mean he didn't. I mean from what I know, he wasn't really his fingers on anything. He kind of popped around.
Anyway, I don't want to talk about Chamath. I'm sorry I even brought
Yeah.
him up.
No,
Screw
no,
him.
just it's people like him, and that's why I'm just clarifying the difference
No, I
between
like him
Chamath
too. I
and
think
what
his
we do is
analysis is good.
they're more kind of mainstream tech, but if he's
But
going to get it.
his point resonated with me that I feel like the Gemini experience is awkward. I don't never know when it's going to. When I do a Google search, I don't know if it's going to like hit Gemini. Sometimes I ask it, like as I'm talking to Gemini. I find my experience in Gemini is great. I love the Gemini app. I don't like the way Gemini sometimes there and sometimes isn't there in search. So my question to you is, what do you think? Do you think they will be disrupted or will they cross the chasm in search?
Google will cross the chasm in search without a doubt. I mean, they already have way too much
Explain your
market share.
logic there, because you know
Well,
this
I mean,
space.
I have to go look at Shamatz's deeper analysis. I'm sure he had a different point of view. In this whole search area, there's so many areas that people can misconstrue. It depends on how you view it, right?
By
So
the way, he didn't say they're not going to cross the chasm. He said they
no, no,
will if they can figure out the
I'm
monetization
just saying
points.
is that there's different angles on Google. Google is a complicated beast. Their earnings are awesome. They're kicking ass, but search, they're stuck in an innovator's dilemma at the same time. They have a core business. So as you know, there's probably a lot of Game of Thrones going on inside Google around search specifically. But the trend towards AI that we covered at Google Next on the cloud side is an indicator, in my opinion, with its culture is. The culture of Google that Sundar is putting out there is make AI native in all products. Then those products then get integrated in either directly to the consumer consumption side or cloud service side. So in my case, the workspace would be have input from Gemini. So the product manager of Gemini isn't saying, hey, I want to build Gemini to make workspace better. They make Gemini to make Gemini better so that workspace can take its data and make it better. So it's a little bit of a nuanced point, but on search, Google search is already getting better. Now, OpenAI has got shopping experience that was in the news today. Rob Hof covered that on SiliconANGLE, and so you have competitors. Again, not to bring up the FTC lawsuit, but they have competition. But they have huge market share. So by default, unless they absolutely drink and are drunk every day and show up to the office and don't do any work, they might lose. But that's not the case. Google isn't going to be, not doing the work. So I think Google search will lose share in the short term, but won't lose position dominantly.
I agree with you, and I'll share something an observation about Microsoft. You think about Microsoft. We always talk about this in the Cube pod. How remember its stock went sideways for 10 years, and essentially when Ballmer was in charge, and but they survived because they had such great cash flow from their Office franchise and their operating systems. It just threw off so much cash, they were able to figure it out. And they were able to miss things. And then, finally Satya comes in and says, well, let's just repoint the company,
Let me ask
change
you a
the
question.
culture and go.
Do you think
And
Microsoft
I just want to make a point. So I think Google will not take 10 years to figure it out, is all I'm saying. And they've got the cash.
do you think Microsoft Bing search got better with OpenAI relationship or not? Or does
No,
it matter?
no,
No, it doesn't.
no, it didn't get better. And no, it doesn't matter.
Yusuf Mehdi, who runs that, is basically, I saw a news story, I can't remember who wrote it, but basically they're not moving the needle. Google, and that is because it's harder to be great at something when you're not great at it with AI. If you're already great at something, if you're already a legend, you've got to maintain legendary status by doing the work. Google is already legendary in search. So it's easier to stay ahead if you're ahead with AI than move the needle and massively have to have a breakthrough of epic proportion. So that's one. The second factor is OpenAI was moving faster than Microsoft across all metrics. New product introductions, more capabilities, a faster build out. I believe that the incumbent nature of Microsoft kind of makes them like the IBM of this generation. IBM had a generation where they stalled a little bit. Now IBM's back in the growth mode because they got better leadership with Arvind. But remember back when IBM was viewed as, the old school, slow, and everyone hated IBM. Larry Ellison used to use them as a pinata every day. And Steve Jobs used to use them as a pinata. Gates couldn't do it because they was in bed with IBM. Um, that's different. It takes a lot more from Microsoft Bing to be successful than Google being successful with AI. So it's a interesting, but it's complicated. Again,
So your point is,
OpenAI did not give Microsoft the lift on Bing that they
right.
thought they would get, and I
So your
blame
point is Google is really good at search, and they're going to figure out how to put AI into search, and they'll thrive.
Google's really good at everything, right? So like they just can't organize their marketing because they don't really do marketing. Google is poor at marketing and they're poor at customer support. I mean, ever try to get your Gmail password changed? I mean, I've lost a couple of email addresses. I'm like, where do you go? There's no customer support. But they've optimized on the tech. So if you look at Google Cloud, you look at Google Search, look at Waymo, look at Alphabet in general, it's a diversified business. I will say the All In podcast actually did a phenomenal job of analyzing Alphabet. I thought Chamath, Sachs, and the team over there, no, the other guy, Freeberg, he crushed it with the analysis on Google Alphabet. I thought he hit a home
Well, he
run.
worked there, right? He was.
I don't know him very well. I mean, I know Jason and Chamath and Sachs well, but I don't know Freeberg. But he crushed the analysis. Alphabet is a diversified machine. I mean, they are kicking ass, and they're technical. They do the work. And now Google Search is already the leader, so they're already winning. They've won, I should say. That's why the government wants to break them up. So I think Google makes it big time. I think Amazon makes it big time. I think Microsoft Cloud makes up for any laggard activity on the product side that's been kind of legacy. I call the IBM effect, the old IBM effect. So I think Azure Cloud kind of gets back in the game. You saw that with the numbers. And I think Google Cloud absolutely rises up into a better position and might even threaten Microsoft. So if Google Cloud continues to do what they're doing,
No,
they could
no,
come in
no.
faster.
Microsoft is so strong. You keep saying, one Cube pod, you were joking. Microsoft's ADO is going to put Microsoft out of business. Microsoft is so freaking strong. And it's ironic to me that the government's trying to break up Google. To me, Microsoft is like the strongest company of all of them. I mean, they're
We'll
everywhere.
see.
They're
We'll
ubiquitous.
see.
And
We'll see.
I will say this though, I am impressed with AWS this quarter. The stock was way down today. AWS has 39% operating margins. I mean, that is awesome. Compare that to Google. Google Cloud. Now remember, Google Cloud, half of Google Cloud's revenue, at least maybe as high as 60%, is software from workspaces. They have like, under 20% operating margin. And so their operating margins are like disk drive gross margin. I mean, it's horrible. So AWS is extremely profitable. What's happening at Azure or at Microsoft is Azure is becoming a bigger and bigger component of its cloud, and it's dragging gross margin down. They don't really report operating margin. They do. You got to go into the 10Qs. In the 10Qs, I think they report intelligent cloud is like 42% operating margin. But remember, intelligent cloud includes all this other mumbo jumbo and on-prem stuff. So, typical Microsoft hiding the ball. The other thing I'll mention is everybody's excited about Azure growth. And I was excited too, because I had them at 28%. They ended up at 35%. But let's not forget what Microsoft did and the game they played with their definitions. They had all this bullshit in their definition. They had mobile, they had a bunch of security stuff, they had all this stuff that wasn't Azure in Azure, okay? And they never reported Azure absolute revenues. And then the leaked documents from the Activision trial it told us what the real number was. It was like 34 billion over a 12-month period. So we were able to reverse engineer the numbers because they have calendar quarters and you have the fiscal quarters. They made some other comments about their market share in the cloud business and infrastructure, the Satya confidential memo. So we analyzed that and took their numbers down. I was already lower than everybody else. I took them down further. And then what Microsoft did last year is they took those old legacy segments out of Azure. They said, we're taking this out of Azure and we're replacing it with AI. Okay. So we're taking this old legacy business, which is in decline, and it's peaked. Taking that out, so essentially, what does that do? That lowers the overall revenue, even though they never reported it. And we're going to insert AI, which remember at the time was probably like a 1 to 2% contribution of Azure revenue was from AI. Now it's up to 16%. So the effect was they lowered the absolute revenue that they never reported, and it jacked up their growth rates. And now Wall Street's all excited about it. Again, I'm excited too, but I'm excited with that caveat that they're playing games with the numbers with their little shell game. So let's not forget that. Whereas AWS has been consistent since 2015 when they started reporting this stuff, or whenever they started reporting it.
Yeah,
So I give
if
them
you,
props. And Google, sorry, one more thing. Google also does not report GCP. They just say things like, and Google Cloud Platform grew significantly faster than Google Cloud overall. All right, just friggin' it's a 12, 15, 20, it's going to be $28 billion business this year. Friggin' report it and report out Azure. Just be transparent and let's just see the data, for crying
yeah,
out loud. It's a big enough segment so that we can do an apples to apples comparison with AWS. And they're just waiting so they can, get to that critical mass. But I
Mike,
will tell you this, sorry, I'm long-winded here. I think AWS has got to step up its SaaS game. It's because it's missing out on the biggest part of the TAM. And
well,
it's going to be interesting to
I'll be
see how they
interviewing
play
Colleen
that.
Aubrey. We'll find out how that's going. But I think, yeah, I love. By the way, great rant. I think that's good to point out and keep an eye on Microsoft. Microsoft's game is well known by insiders, and you just pointed it out. When Microsoft's behind, they basically have a false narrative, and then they get the engineers working on it. They've always been a fast follower in almost everything that they do. I think what your point is, and I think if I was going to squint through the analysis and read the tea leaves on what you just said, is that I think Microsoft's sitting there saying we won't break that out until we can actually have apples to apples, and I
Yeah.
don't think they have the apples to apples. And if you look at the past 5 years,
Well, they
just
have it. They're just lower.
yeah, of course. Why would you show your cards if the market's not smart enough to ask the question? Okay, and then they don't
I'm
have it.
wicked shiny here, John. I got a de-shine here. I'm killing the audience. How's that?
If you're listening, Dave just de-shined himself with the shining tool. I didn't even don't they didn't put makeup. I got the cube jacket on now. Look at the past 5 years, Dave. I mean, I was just looking at some of the stock prices. I was talking to Brian Bauman this morning, NYC Wired. The ICE, which is the Intercontinental Exchange, they're up 95% over the past 5 years. ICE is the parent company, the NYSE. They got
Wow.
services. If you look at Microsoft 5 year growth, we've got Amazon. I mean, everybody's up, but the ones that are up and to the right have modern practices. Microsoft does because they, again, back to my Google argument, they're the poster child on not to sound contradictory, but they had the customers. So their software estate, you point this out all the time, has been a cash cow. That's been subsidizing Azure. OpenAI gives them the modern lift between OpenAI and the installed base of Microsoft. They're playing that game. So I expect Microsoft to continue to get Azure sales so they can actually compete on the value. I'm not sure they can compete on value with Amazon head to head, and the numbers probably don't show it. So hence they don't break it out. But I'm sure smart analysts on Wall Street are going to ask that question. Again,
Well,
that's why my thesis is product-led growth. The next 5 years will be the number one financial analyst question in investor confidence. What's going on the roadmap? Because you got so much supply chain. Now you got geopolitical. You got faster coding with things like the code assistance and the no code market vibe coding that's happening. All that's going to point to revenue, and the difference will be what's real revenue that's sustainable and which ones are not. I think we talked about this on the pod a few pods ago about how, the 1 million annual recurring revenue conversation. You go back 5 years, you got multiple rounds of funding. Now you can't get a term sheet because people can't maintain that, right? So there's so much competition for that. What I call that part of the market, which is pre-escape velocity. A lot of companies are competing for dollars and they're getting them fast, but they can't sustain them. And I think this is going to change venture capital. It's going to change private investing. I think you're going to start to see a new kind of investor profile in the private markets. And certainly since companies like Databricks cannot go public because they're sitting on tons of cash, if that late stage cycle comes back, again, we're back to that movie. So I think capital markets have changed. I think you have the tech industry around product-led growth is changing. And until it matures, which won't be for at least 5 years, that's the secret to product-led growth.
Well, and now I took us off RSAC. You started to talk about security, um, and so in security, it's like platform-led growth, isn't it? It's like that's what we heard this week. So George Kurtz made some comments like we used to have sort of best of breed versus best of suite. Now we have best of breed versus best of platform. So it's product-led tools and best of breed, and it's the best platform. The platform being whether it's Palo Alto or
Yeah.
CrowdStrike or Zscaler plus Palo Alto plus Okta, et cetera. It was an interesting RSA, wasn't it? You want to talk about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think RSA, like I said before, and I said it on the Cube and bang on this drum for over a year, if not two, the security industry that was the classic RSA black hat, which gets all the cybersecurity professionals, is such a diverse. Jackie McGuire and I were talking about this that you got military people buttoned up, and then you got hoodie crowd tatted up, coders, hackers, all in one as one unified community, and they're sharing. It's a whole different vibe. It's a vibe culture right now, and it's really a melting pot. Okay, that being said, the security industry is by far, in my view, the proxy for understanding what's happening in AI, and I'll tell you why. They have to secure all aspects of a company against the adversary, who's getting better too. So the asymmetry of the attacks, yeah, they're moving fast too. So as the scales get leveled somewhat or close to leveled versus the whole unleveling, the bad guys are moving faster. So that means the technologists who are in security are very systems oriented. They're very data oriented. They're very performance oriented. They're dealing with compliance. They're dealing with threats, a lot of real time. And so I think they represent probably the fully integrated kind of capabilities that an enterprise for the future will need to look like for everything, the HR department. So they're kind of like the canary in the coal mine. If I was a betting man on stocks and companies, I would look at cyber today to what the enterprise will look like in 3 to 5 years, because you have to nail everything. You remember going back a few years ago, early days of the Cube, shift left. It was security was like the guardrails, the no department. No, put the guardrails. What's holding up? The AI is kind of becoming that now. The guardrails, you're starting to see they're the no department versus the go department. Go forward.
Eh,
So I think that's going to be interesting. So how you deal with security infrastructure, networks, compute, to act on the data harmonization, which you love talking about, and then what applications are going to change the labor market in there. It's all in play,
I
all
want
of
to
it.
ask you a question. I want to ask you a question. So when the cloud ascended, it
Hmm.
became the most important thing. It also became the first line of defense for security. And then there was a shared responsibility model, which a lot of people didn't understand. Some people will tell me customers oftentimes still don't understand that, but the savvy customers do. So you had the first line of defense was the cloud, and then you had the shift left, which basically said, okay, developers, now you're responsible for security. Yeah, thanks a lot. And developers like, I got to do security now, and so what I heard at RSA this year, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this because you
Yeah.
do a lot of the developer shows, is that AI is going to help that pain because security guys, I mean, those developers, they don't really. They're not security people, so they don't really want to have to worry about this stuff. They want help in doing that. And AI, there was some companies talking about how their AI will help the guys that are shifting left be more secure and
Mhm.
take a lot of that off the plate. Is that viable? Is my question.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And you brought up the cloud security was an indicator. Remember, I don't know if you remember, but it was like 2014. We had our first Andy chassis. It might have been 2013. I can't remember what year it was. It was like a long time ago. We also interviewed Steven Schmidt. Okay,
Yep.
Steven Schmidt. He was the first CISO. Now he's the CSO, which he's got physical
He
security.
he was the keynote at Reinforce, the
And
first Reinforce.
if you remember back, this is before Reinforce even started. He was just like a guy on the
In
team.
fact, he gave a keynote at DC Summit with
Yeah,
Teresa Carlson
we
and talked about the CIA
we
deal.
yeah, and that's how we got the Amazon deeper coverage. But remember our first interview with him. You and I asked him. I think you might have been the one specifically went after him on this, not after him, but like pointed questions. Said, is cloud less secure than on-prem? This is 2013, 2014. And
Mm.
cloud was viewed as a misunderstood, like amateur cloud, amateur infrastructure. He had a great answer even back then. He said it's complex. It's actually a better security posture. He actually used that word posture. I remember that vividly. I'm like, security posture. He
Mm.
was already talking in over a decade ago, okay, of this. So today, the top conversation at RSA was posture management, security posture, cloud security. We predicted it and was certainly one of the number one or not number two topics of cloud security, data security, all there.
Vulnerability
Amazon's been doing it. They've
management.
been doing it
Yep.
for over a decade, hardcore. So, and we're like, everyone's rolling their eyes. This cloud's unsecure. That was the ding against the cloud was at that time in the go-to-market motions for the incumbents that are probably no longer around was saying,
I can add some color there too, by the
yeah,
way.
please do, because they said, remember, oh, the cloud's not secure. That was their FUD factor, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Spread some FUD, as they say. And the
So
FUD was, hey, they're not secure. Don't go with them. Go with us. Renew.
what I
5-year deal.
learned, what I learned from talking to customers is the cloud security was better, had definitely had better posture, but it was different than what was on-prem. And so in order to be able to deploy stuff in the cloud, you had all these corporate edicts which said you must comply with this security,
Yeah.
posture, template, whatever. These are our security policies. Thou shalt not deviate. And they were like, well, we want to put this stuff in the cloud. Well, how does it do on-prem data protection? Well, it doesn't. Well, that's a problem. So,
No.
I'm making up some stupid thing, like it's not even relevant anymore. And
Yeah.
so they had to get through that. The SecOps teams had to educate the audit teams and the security board, everything, in order to pass that and create sort of a new set of edicts. So it took some time. And then now, I mean, I think there's nobody questions that the cloud security is better, notwithstanding there is a shared responsibility model.
It's interesting. What came out of RSA is the cloud security was a big one. The replatforming, we called that one too, and a bunch of other things. But one thing that I love about theCUBE is that if you noticed, um, some of the billionaire founders that came on, Palo Alto, CrowdStrike, and Zscaler, all founders. So what's interesting, and what I was talking to Jackie McGuire about on our wrap up yesterday was, and I want to riff with you on this, is that I love having the founders that are still around on the cube because their view of what's happening is very opportunity recognition like. They see what's coming next. Nir Zook said something compelling. I had the Palo Alto commentary was great. Jay came out from Zscaler. They all talked about the same thing. But my takeaway was squinting through what are they seeing? I love the line about SolarWinds having access to the network. That hack was all about monitoring vulnerabilities. They could see everything, therefore no one stopped them and go through all the firewalls. The fact that all those firewall vendors that were at that time state-of-the-art security are no longer around means that the network is commodity transit. Okay, Jay Chaudhry even talked about that directly. Nir Zook was much more about you got to go against the conventional wisdom and run at the new thing. They ran at cloud first before anyone else, and then cannibalize their own installed base. All the founders were still talking about the same thing. The Gen AI is the data security piece of it. And what came out of my conversation with Palo Alto Networks is that post-COVID, the whole SASE market is ununified, right? With core core infrastructure that's comfortable on-prem for security teams. And then the other thing that I was squinting through the founders was this notion that what's the difference between homogeneous systems and heterogeneous systems relative to security? Because data security, if you don't have homogeneity, you can't see everything securely. So this is a very counterintuitive point because if you look at, I mentioned that OSI stack, it was homogeneous. They set standards. So the question is, will there be an evolution of, you know, um, fragmented standards by vendor? Again, back to best of platform. If I'm going to run a platform and say robotics and manufacturing or automotive, why would I want to have a heterogeneous system? I want everything to work fast, real time, because all the components are tied to my software and data layer. So you got to have end to end on that. So in a way, I'm kind of twisted around because I'm like, I'm anti-homogeneous because I think heterogeneous is about interoperability. But when you
Yeah.
need data integrity, Homogeneous is actually better, which then comes back to NVIDIA, GTC. They were pushing homogeneity on
Yeah, so does
everybody.
Hawk Tan, right? Hawk Tan is all about homogeneity, but I guarantee all this agentic stuff is going to be heterogeneous,
It
and all this
sounds
AI
it.
is going to be heterogeneous. There's no
So
standard. I
again,
mean,
this
I know
geez,
Anthropic and Google are putting out
are
standards,
we
and they're
seeing
competing
an are we
standards. And
seeing an open OSI model like thing happening here? Because if you go homogeneous, you're back to the mini computer days, which we were riffing on about. Hey, that's proprietary. It's not proprietary. It's just proprietary in its nature.
yeah,
It's just
well,
bizarre.
history
It's
history
almost
echoes.
it's
Yeah.
almost, I think it's a really, I think it's, this is a new thing I'm watching very closely because it flips the architecture a certain way because there's winners, clear winners and losers on this one point. If you are not in that homogeneous stack, then you're out. I mean, you're either in or you're out.
Yeah.
So, oh, it's bizarre. It's fun. It's fun. It's a fun time.
But I mean, through the course of time, you've seen the tug of war between homogeneous and heterogeneous stacks. I mean, look at Snowflake, right? I mean, their ascendancy was a function of the fact that they had everything, under control, under their roof, and then they get attacked with iceberg and open table formats, and they have to evolve, and they do. And so this is to me, it's history
Yeah.
repeating or echoing.
Well, Dave, we've got 100 podcasts under our belt.
Awesome. Are we done already? We just blew through almost an hour. We
Yeah, I
really
mean,
didn't.
it's going to be hard to find a title for this podcast.
I know
100th.
it's like Bishigots.
Yeah. Well, I think we're kind of fatigued out. I mean, RSA was, even though there's been some chirping around how the booths weren't as valuable this year, I thought it was probably one of the most valuable shows I've been to in the 9 years we've been there because of the changing landscape. Okay. There were more storylines this RSA than I've ever seen before. Number one. Number two, new vendors emerging, a lot of M&A with the Wiz thing with Google. You had all kinds of the platformization and then just the blocking and tackling work, right? I mean, in there, some of the basic stuff that needs to be attended to day to day. So I thought it was an exciting show. I thought it was chock full of rich content. I thought the insights were plentiful. I thought the execution from the show was good. The weather was great. So overall, just a great event.
I would call people's attention to Billionaires Day. I call it Billionaires Day. We had 3 billionaires on in one day. It was Nir Zook. I thought Nir was good. I mean, he was controversial and cocky. I just like to interview him
He
because
doesn't hold back. He's
yeah,
just
he'll say
he's all
anything.
truth bombs everywhere.
And Jay Chaudhry, he's always on message, but he's a very deep thinker. And he definitely pushes his company's messaging, but he's a visionary. And then George, I thought George was a little distracted at first, and then he got into it. So those
Yeah.
three were really really good. And if you haven't listened to the Mark Benioff sit down we did 50 minutes, 50 minutes, George Gilbert and I. For the first 20 minutes, he was kind of on point, and you can get on his messaging. You can get that from any of his 20 plus podcasts he's done for the last, 6 months. But then we got into it. He demonstrated technical chops. You've always said he's a techie, and it was great. So if you haven't listened to
Well,
that,
he's a
it's
techie. He's
really
a
worth a
techie,
listen.
and Mark Benioff's not only a techie, he's also a really good communicator. He knows the zeitgeist. He follows the trends, and sometimes some people over criticize him for that, but I think that's a superpower for him. He's not a hype mouse. He's just in tune with the pulse. Now, I will tell you on the Mark Benioff interview you did with him, I got a lot of people were talking to me about that at RSA. Had multiple people come up and say, "Hey, I love the Benioff interview," and then a couple not snarky comments, but like interesting comments was your reference to the next software hyperscaler. So uh,
Yeah.
I thought, Dave, that was really a great point, and I want you to kind of take me through that because I want people to hear this because it brings up a good point about what Benioff's thinking and what you kind of
Okay.
connected the dots on in real
I'm
time
gonna
because
I'm
the
gonna talk to you about
software
that.
hyperscaler thing. I mean, there's a Larry Ellison comment in there about where's the server somewhere, right? The old remember that Churchill Club
Yeah, right. Yes,
thing,
yes, yes.
the
It's
Churchill Club.
servers and storage and databases, right, and software. So, okay. So first of
Talk about
all,
that.
that idea first got planted in my head by George Gilbert. So George has his fingerprints on, most much, if not most of my thinking on data. He's really influenced me, George. And of course, I've been in data for a long time. So, but George gave me that idea. And when we were talking about, harmonizing data and an agentic control framework, he pointed to Salesforce and he said, Dave, these guys are actually doing this stuff. And when we dug in and looked at the technology behind it, with their data cloud sort of initially was kind of rudimentary, but it's getting more and more capable. And where that comes from, let me explain to people. So what we posed to Benioff is, do you aspire to be the fourth hyperscaler, but one that's software only? And he basically said, you guys might be onto something here, but he has to be careful because here's why. So within all the Salesforce properties, whether it's their CRM and Slack and Tableau, et cetera, all the properties that they've acquired, and they have MuleSoft to help integrate this stuff and harmonize all the data, within their world, they have total control and they can bring in this stuff. One of the things he was really interesting in that interview was he was like, yeah, we're buddies, we're partners with Snowflake and Databricks, and we can basically take their data and harmonize that. So that's where that idea came from, is essentially we can federate that. He used that term many times. So imagine Salesforce being the fourth hyperscaler, but one that's software only, where they are federating all these data sources, and they are the ones doing the harmonization. They are ones doing the agent control framework, maybe communicating with other agents, and they have the scale model. And so their marginal economics are far superior than, for example, Workday alone or ServiceNow alone or SAP alone. And they're comparable to the hyperscalers, and they don't have to worry about all the hardware. Now, they do have to pay the COGS tax to AWS, but that's all right. They're getting a good deal, and they're building massive operating leverage on top. So that's what that was referring to. Yeah. So I thought that was pretty interesting, his reaction to that.
Well, I mean, I think he's got to smile because that would be a nice feather in his cap. And if I was advising Mark Benioff, I'd be like, look, I would run with that because it kind of matches well with the vibe culture we're moving into. If you look at, again, I was talking to Jackie McGuire about this. This millennial generation is coming into decision-making power, and vibe coding's hot, but the vibe coding points to a cultural shift, right? You're talking about software-led innovation. That's what agentic does, and that's what Salesforce cares about. But in general, they have a cloud scale too. So like, they just can't say they're a hyperscaler, but they can say they're a software hyperscaler if they do software hyperscaling. So it's a really interesting categorical positioning for Salesforce. Even on CNBC, I watched Mark Benioff's interview there. The reporter said, no, he commented to the reporter that Elon Musk said to him that why do you call your company Salesforce? You have more other things. He goes, maybe we should just change the name to, how about Agentforce? So I wouldn't be surprised if he changes the name of the company, just like Meta changed from Facebook to Meta. And now Meta is kind of like metaverse or meta of metadata, whatever they're calling it. But I think Salesforce might want to think about changing their name. Benioff kind of volunteered that data point because they're more than just Salesforce.com. They got tons of stuff. They got the data cloud, which is core to their strategy. They got Heroku there powering a bunch of PaaS. They got all kinds of services that are going to be abstracted away in software at scale. So that hangs together. Now, if you're Andy Jassy or Matt Garman, like, what are you talking about? Right. So I might even ask Matt Garman. I might even ask Matt Garman that when I see him on June 4th. I have a one-on-one with Matt Garman and the whole Amazon team on video. I'll get a bunch of video, which we're going to publish on June 19th. Mark your calendar. We got a big focus on a halftime report of AWS mid-year review. Dave, it hangs together in my mind. I'm like, that hangs.
Well, and the other thing too you want to think about here is he kept positioning Snowflake and Databricks as partners. Now, if you're Snowflake and Databricks, what are you doing? Let's take Snowflake as the clearer example. Databricks is sort of disrupting. But so Snowflake's got the database. The point of control is shifting from the database to the governance catalog. The governance catalog is becoming more open with things like Databricks Unity and even Snowflake Polaris. So a lot of that function is becoming open source. So the value is not only going to the governance catalog, but it's going further up the stack into the applications layer. So that's where Salesforce is playing, because they have the the business logic, the process data, which is, by the way, uniquely Salesforce is leveraging that ahead of most. They've got the metadata, so they've got access to all that stuff. It's locked inside their platform. Snowflake and Databricks, they don't have access to that. So how do they get access to that? You know, Celonis is trying to be this horizontal agentic play. They're suing SAP because they can't get access to that data. So there's a really interesting battle brewing where Salesforce, because it's got platform-led growth, could actually become the federated platform to harmonize all this data and to serve, to be the agentic platform. I really believe that is Benioff's vision, and they're actually executing on it because they've got engineering that from what we can tell is doing the work. They've never really historically done a great job of doing that integration. It's pretty clear to us they're actually spending the effort doing that. And I asked him, was that luck? And he goes, yeah, sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. I mean, the timing was good, but we kind of saw this coming and we put resource on it. So now he's also a marketer. He said to us, I write a lot of books on marketing. I'll send you some. He said that to George. He said, but he did say, look, don't confuse my marketing, like i.e. my clippy comments with, you know, what's actually going on in the market. We have a deep understanding of what's happening in the market. And so they're pragmatic is essentially what he's saying. And so I love the trolling, the clippy. And then of course, Nadella, said, oh, all SaaS is just going to disappear and it's going to be agents talking to CRUD databases. There's some truth to that, right? To the point I was making earlier, the database is less and less the point of control, except for Oracle. Oracle will maintain that point of control in the database layer.
That's it's a great, I wanted to call that out. I love that positioning. Just to kind of end on our 100th anniversary pod here, as we hit the 100 mark, I did a little perplexity and I said, how does SiliconANGLE coverage rank among the media coverage of RSAC? It gave us great marks. It said, SiliconANGLE alongside Media on theCUBE is providing extensive real-time coverage of RSAC and World Large Conference. And then it categorizes, the coverage is positioned as both comprehensive and analytical, focused on the emerging themes such as AI-driven security, platform consolidation, and changing cybersecurity budgets. And then it did a little grid summary table, SiliconANGLE versus other media, RSA media coverage. SiliconANGLE is the outlet coverage style, live, analytical, deep. Focus area, trends, practitioner insight. Influence/ranking, high among industry media. Mainstream media is number 2. Coverage style, headlines, news briefs. Focus area, keynotes, government, big vendors. Influence/ranking, highest general reach. Makes sense, reach vehicles. And then they didn't have anybody else. They just put everyone else into the trade press bucket. Product news, roundups, launches, startups.
Do you think the prompt influences the... I mean, we know it does, but how much do you think it influences the results? In other words, what was the prompt again? What was the prompt?
How does SiliconANGLE.com coverage rank among media covering RSAC 2025? That's a pretty generic prompt.
Yeah, but you mentioned SiliconANGLE.
Well, that's what I wanted to compare. I could prompt something else. What do you think? What
if you ask it like, who had the best media coverage at RSAC 2025? Let me do that.
Well, the problem is they don't understand the media. What does it mean? Video media, we made it on the video side. Who had the best video coverage? That was SiliconANGLE, theCUBE. They call it SiliconANGLE, theCUBE. Because if you put in frequency, frequency, who had the most articles?
Yeah, you get PR Newswire. Oh my God. Okay, who had the best media coverage at RSAC 2025? The best media coverage at RSAC 2025 was driven by outlets and platforms that focused on the most influential and widely discussed themes, with theCUBE, SiliconANGLE Media, SC Media, and IT Pro standing out for both depth and engagement. According to event organizers, RSAC 2025 generated over 500 pieces of media content. We did that in like an hour. 618 million social impressions and a potential readership of over 1.8 billion. Key highlights. theCUBE and SiliconANGLE were widely recognized for their real-time interviews, live analysis, and deep dives into the defining theme of the year, agentic AI. Their coverage included top CISOs, industry analysts, and founders, and was repeatedly cited by other media and industry blogs as setting the agenda for the event. That's
What was
kind
the
of
prompt
cool.
on that one? Because I had a different
Dude,
response.
generic prompt. Who had the best media coverage at RSAC 2025? You did the same prompt? And then
Yeah.
SC Media and IT Pro, Solutions Review, Gregory's FCA Analysis, Summary Table, SiliconANGLE theCUBE. Dude, that's freaking impressive.
No, I didn't get anything. I had a different.
What'd you get?
I got a
You
different
had the same
answer.
prompt?
Same prompt, different answer.
Huh.
Who had the
What was
best media coverage at RSAC 2025 or 25?
2025?
Yeah, no, it's not on there. I think this is what generative does. It's just different answers. Again, that's why the security thing is interesting because it's hard, it's non-deterministic. You get different answers every time. So, um, I'm not sure. I'm not logged into the pro version. You have the pro version?
Yeah, that was the pro version.
Yeah, yeah. Let me go to Google and see what Google says.
Let me ask Grok. That's weird. I got excited and then you got a different answer.
Take a
Who was it?
screenshot of that. Sounded good to me.
Who was I know, right? Pimping ourselves. Sorry, folks. But who did it say was, I mean, it's all right to say, right? I mean, who did it say was the best?
Well, I typed in Google who had the best media coverage of RSA 2025. You have SiliconANGLE George Kurtz interview. Number two pops up on the video thing. Um, GregoryFCA.com. SiliconANGLE's up there. SC Media, Yahoo Finance, RSA Commerce, IT Pro, SiliconANGLE, and then
Grok misunderstood. Um, it just gave me vendors. Oh, interesting. Okay. So Grok, I said, no, independent media, not vendors. It said ISMG. Interesting. We met those guys. We had dinner with those guys.
Yeah.
IT Pro, SC Media, SiliconANGLE, PR Newswire, The Register. Interesting.
It's interesting to think. I actually sent
All
a
over the
note
place.
to the founder of Perplexity because I saw a post on LinkedIn from Pete Sonsini. They just did a story on Bloomberg, just did a story on Databricks and Perplexity and the investors behind them, which was Pete Sonsini was a big investor. He's the brains behind both Databricks. He's a Cal guy, Cal Berkeley. So, well, Dave, we're just cranking along here. Check it out, everyone. Thanks for listening. 100th episode. Check out siliconangle.com, thecube.net, thecuberesearch.com. When you get there, click the research button. Front page is just a generic landing page. Check out the flow. Great free research there. And of course, May is a bunch of events. You're going to see us all over the place. IBM Think is happening next week. We got Nutanix next event happening that week. And then May, we're everywhere in May. We got tons of events. I'm excited for Dell Tech World, Red Hat Summit, and Think all happening too. I mean, IBM and Red Hat, I love that combination. I think Dell's on fire with the AI Factory. By the way, I saw John Rose, who's a CTO and head of AI at AI Center of Excellence over there at Dell. He was sharing with me that, his observation was everyone has like 5 jobs now. And so AI is going to help them get back down to 3, the normal workload. And I asked people that question, Dave, and that was pretty consistent. Everyone feels like they have more jobs on their plate now. So check us out. We're all over the place in May.
Dude, we got number 1 at ChatGPT too.
Yeah.
03. I just sent you
the velocity's flying, and shout out to Brian Bauman of NYC Wired. His LinkedIn had over 100,000 impressions from his coverage of NYC Wired, which was essentially partnering with theCUBE. We had Matan, we had Sandesh there, Kevin was there.
Brian Hebert was unbelievable.
Brian Hebert, who's now got a new role at ICE, he had a really great analysis piece. Again, I love the contribution from experts, Dave. It's not an expert network, it's an expert media network come emerging. Their contributions and the founders too that come in and the startups, the private companies, really laying down a lot of commentary. Shout out to Brian, the team, NYSE. We're going to be up and running. We're going to be on a little bit of a road trip. So idle in May, June, and July. We got a huge AWS Summit week in New York. We're going to be
not totally idle. I'm down there next week.
Yeah, you're there on the 8th and 9th. Good for you.
Just the 8th. I got Juan Loiza coming on, and then I got Zhamak Dagani and one other guest, and then I got to go.
Yeah. Well, Dave, great to see you. A salute on the 100th. Good to see you.
Congratulations, John. What a pleasure.
Yeah,
Always, this is my
yeah.
favorite part of the week, just riffing with you.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
it's
like
fun.
it's fun because you and I would have these phone calls that would go on for hours. Like when I'm driving to the Cape, it's a one phone, or the New York, it's a one phone call conversation with
Yeah.
you, and we talk about this kind of stuff. And it's great that we record
Yeah.
it and created a pod out of it. So thank you.
All right. Well, Dave, have a great weekend, and we'll see you in
Oh,
Boston.
Derby Day,
Derby Day.
Saturday.
All
So
right.
make your picks, people.
All right.
Bet often.
Horses for courses. Is the track going to be light, heavy? What do you think?
I don't know what the
look
weather
like?
is, but there's going to be 21 horses. It's going to be like a cavalry charge. So I haven't
see.
studied yet. I got to study up tonight. I just
All right.
printed the form.
Have a
All right,
great
we'll see ya.
weekend.
Thanks,
Bye.
you too. Bye.